we're now going to start off with some tinting of some of these panels. Now before we sort of move on with that, it is kind of crucial that we have just done all our natural metal finish here. Make sure you seal it in with a gloss coat, something like intermediate Gauzy agent, something that's like water based, because we're now going to be using oils and enamels, and if you don't seal it in with a gloss coat, this enamel based natural metal finish is just gonna eat into it and ruin it. So make sure you've nicely sealed it in. So there's two ways we can apply this, right? I'm going to show you both of them. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to start off with these oil brushes. These are nice oils by Ammo. Right, we're going to use the ochre to start off with and sort of kind of nicely take one of these panels and change the colour, right? So to do a tint, well, first way of applying is simply straight out of the bottle, and we can just dab on here, and basically what we're going to end up doing is actually mixing on the model, right? And then I'm just going to come on in with some of Ammo's enamel odorless thinners, right? This one seems to work quite well. And what we're going to do is going to dip a little bit on the end of our paintbrush. We don't want it to be flooded, right? So we bring you in, and what we're going to do is just stub this down, right? Just stub it down, right? As you can see, it's quite thick at the moment, right? Actually, that's probably a little bit too much thinners on the end of my paintbrush, so I'm just going to kitchen paper towel dab that down, right, and I can suck a little bit up, right, and what we want to do is just start moving this around. But what we could do is, this is why it's good to have a nice good flat brush, is we just start to sort of, you know, paint it right up to the edges, right, so we get the whole panel, right, but we don't go sort of moving off onto other panels. Just like so, nice and careful. Although if you do make a mistake, I'll show you later, it is easy to clean up, right? So now we've got it pretty much everywhere. What we want to do is start feathering it in and sort of nicely getting it just right. So I'm just sort of cleaning off my paintbrush so it's nice and clean. Again, making sure the paintbrush isn't soaking, just kind of damp. So you just clean it on a kitchen paper towel. And then we're going to start again stubbing it down, right? We're not even letting this dry actually, we're just going to stub this down so it gets lighter and lighter, right? And if you want to sort of just kind of keep doing that, it's just basically a task of, right, now we've sort of stubbed that down a bit more, as you can see, right, it's giving that that one panel there sort of like a nice tinge to it, a nice tint. I don't want to go too far, so I'm going to have another go at this. So I'm just cleaning my paintbrush off again, right, making sure my paintbrush is just moist. I want to stub this down again. Hopefully I don't go too far, but I want it to have just a little bit of a tinge, right? Don't want it to be too much too in your face, right? And this is the process you do. You just kind of keep stubbing it down, cleaning it up, moving it around so it's all nice and feathered, right? No sort of overpowering spots. And hopefully now you can see that's been stubbed down just probably just nice and lightly, that it just gives us that little bit of a tinge on that panel just there. We can use lots and lots and lots of colors. You know, you could use blacks, blues, browns, all sorts to get different sort of effects. We are going to now have a little go. Where shall we have a little go? Shall we just do a panel on the underside? Let's have a go at a panel on the underside just here. Another way of going about applying this is, if we get out, say, a nice palette here, we can actually mix on the palette instead. So instead of having blobs on your model and you you know, slowly sort of, you know, stub it down and get it just to the right tint, right, we can sort of mix this now on our palette, right, just get a little bit like this, like a really sort of nice tinge, right, but sort of mainly sort of thinners going on here, right, we can just sort of paint this on like so, really sort of kind of make a very sort of light, very transparent bit of oil paint specifically for the job. Right, it probably may be a bit better to do it this way, because as you can see, right, there's not so much work to do or involved in it, right, because we are just sort of, hopefully as you can see there, we're just giving that bit of a tinge. I mean, maybe that's not tinged enough for me, to be fair, maybe a little bit more, so we could maybe mix in a little bit more oil, and again spreading it out. Right, and this is the beauty of using like oils, is that it's so easy to just kind of like feather this all in. So hopefully maybe you can sort of see that that's got a nice blue sort of tinge. Do you know, I might go a little bit darker with that one actually, so maybe not tingy enough. Right, I suppose really in a way, the first way I've shown you, you're sort of slowly kind of lightening it up, and as you can see, I'm mixing it actually off the model, right, you kind of end up sort of having to play around, but I suppose with a bit of experience you can sort of, you know, get used to it and get the tint just right. Right, so we're sort of getting there with that now, but I want to sort of spread it out nicely, so that'll give us a nice blue tinge to this panel. Right, and there we go. I think we're pretty much done there. It gives it a nice blue sort of tint to it, and that should kind of give us those different sort of colours. And I'm just going to go off and do that to, you know, a bunch of random panels here and there, giving them sort of different tints to represent that whole sort of natural metal finish and everything. As a quick note, right, I mean, just in case you don't like it, just in case, let's just say maybe you've done a load of panels and maybe you've done too many panels and it starts looking like a rainbow or something, right, it is easy, right, I can come along, get my paintbrush nice and clean, right, with some of our thinners, right, and plain and simply we can just clean this up. So if you did go over, say, the panel, right, by accident, you know, you could just get out your thinners and just start cleaning this up like I am now. A paintbrush or a cotton wool bud, and we can just start wiping this up until that's all nicely cleaned off. As you can see, this is kind of like the beauty of it, you know, it's so easy to sort of clean it all nicely up, start again, or maybe you don't like too many panels and all that good stuff. So that would be that. Now what's going to happen now is we need to seal this in again, right, with some more gloss coats, right, so as we are ready for decaling, following the whole usual procedure of sealing in your decals, doing the decals, sealing them in. I'll do a bit of weathering, and then I'm probably going to finish this one off and we'll show you how to do some final post shading to the natural metal finish, just to give it a nice bit more sort of life and weathering, and hopefully we should be all done. We're now going to do the final touches of our natural metal finish just here. As you can see, we're all nicely decaled up and ready for this final post shading, right? It's a little bit different from normal post shading because it's natural metal finish. You've got to be a little bit more careful. So what we're going to start off with, well, first off, I'm actually bringing out the Hard & Sternbeck's Infinity. I'm bringing this out because it's more designed to get in close. It's got a 0.15mm needle, really tiny needle, really tiny nozzle, really good for getting in close. Now when you want to get in close, right, I've already sort of taught you about sort of getting your biting point and everything, but what we're going to do, we want to get in so close, we're going to thin this down, really thin this down. It's around about 10 to 5% paint, right, to thinners, so proper thin. It also means that we can get our air pressure right down. I'm literally at about 5, 6, 7 psi, really bringing it down. You can do that because there's very little paint, it's mostly thinners. And for the whole reason for this is we can get in close, right? Because you know, if your air pressure is too high, you know, it's going to start cobwebbing and having that spider legs effect. So nice and thin, nice and low pressure, so we can get right in close. Also, the whole point is as well is that because we have a natural metal finish here, I'm just going to show you what I'm doing. All right, so as you could probably hear, I've got my finger down on our trigger just here, and you can hardly hear the air coming out. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to be getting in really close, getting that biting point just as the paint comes out. Right, I'm going to follow these panel lines, so I'm going to be really careful. And yes, it's going to be transparent, and we want it to be transparent. Let's get my biting point spray that out a bit, bind it. Okay. Right, so it's going to be really transparent, right? But that's what we basically want here. So I'm just starting to just follow around, right? And I'm kind of just barely sort of doing some of these panel lines. Hopefully, as you can see, I mean, some of them I'll give them a quick once over, right? But then, do you know what? This odd little panel line here and there, I'll give it a little bit more. Right, and what we'll end up with is this very sharp, very light, transparent paint that's going to be a little bit more in places and virtually nothing, virtually hardly visible in others. Right, and the whole reason for this, right, is we're talking natural metal finishes. So hopefully what you can just see there is, you know, very sort of lightly done. We can just see, you know, little sort of, mainly just kind of like little patches of this paint, very sort of hardly noticeable. Right, and we want to keep it light, because when it comes to things like this, right, you can so easily, so quickly take away from the natural metal finish. All right, so I'll just quickly show you one side that I've done, because it does take time. You've got to be careful and really sort of steady. But if I just sort of show you, say, this wing just here, hopefully you can just see that, you know, there is some post shading going on here. You've got little spots here and there along the fuselage. You know, it might be a bit hard to see on camera because it does shine actually, but there is like these sort of nice little sort of areas where there's that little bit of post shading just to dirty it up a little bit. And as I say, the whole point, right, the whole point is this, is you don't want to take away from natural metal finish. I mean, yes, you know, I've done in the past, I've really weathered them up and everything, and they look cool, and if you want to go down that route, that's cool. But the whole point is I want to keep that natural metal finish still coming to the foreground, because I know if you kind of really go for it, really sort of do the post shading, do the weathering, it really can knock back that natural metal finish. And this is what I'm after here, is to just keep that natural metal finish still in there. So that's just some really getting in close, really thin down, really low air pressure, doing it very lightly, literally almost most of the panel lines almost having virtually hardly any final post shading on there, most only a couple kind of having that little bit more. Also, I mean, not a bad idea as well, just to keep things nice and sharp and neat for the natural metal finish. I mean, we have all your flaps, your ailerons, all your tail bits and whatnot, right? I like to mask these up, right, to really give us a sharp edge, to kind of show that these areas are a little bit more dirty. Now, yes, we have got a very thin mixture here, so you know, this is gonna, maybe you might want to sort of have a couple of passes, right, just a couple of passes, right, because you've got to kind of build it up a little bit to maybe make it look a little bit more dirtier than everywhere else, right? And I'm kind of just generally sort of giving this a bit of a darkening pretty much all over it, but then I'll probably just come in and give it a nice little sharp one right along the edge, right, getting in close, give it a sharp edge to it. Alright, so if I just quickly that again, this is something you want to take your time, get that biting point just right. Right, and because you're getting in close, again, you've got to be sort of nice and careful, really hold that biting point, because you could get cobwebs and spider and stuff. This is why we're having the air pressure so low, and we can just remove the masking tape and we get sort of like a nice sharp edge just on there. Admittedly, I'm looking at the camera and it's kind of hard. Mark one eyeball, I can see it, but I know the camera sort of brings the shine off the natural metal finish, and you're maybe not quite seeing it as good as with the Mark one eyeball, but trust me, it just kind of keeps that natural metal finish coming through and in your face. And that is basically it for everything I'm going to teach you now. I'm just going to finish off getting the final matte coats on this and everything, and give you the final reveal. And here she is, all nice and finished. Hopefully you've enjoyed this episode, only being like 3 episodes long and just concentrating on advanced stuff. But here she is. I have finished her off with a nice matte coat. That is sort of like a personal preference, to be honest with you. You could get away with a nice satin to sort of keep a bit of shine to it, and it sort of helps the natural metal finish that little bit better, but I prefer a nice matte coat. And hopefully, as you can see as well, by just sort of going for that very sort of light final post shading, we're not taking away from the natural metal finish. It's still there. I mean, if you've seen my work in the past, you know, I do kind of really go for it with things like pre-shading, post-shading, bleaching, and you can really see all the panel lines coming out and stuff, but I've gone quite light deliberately so as we can keep that natural metal finish. So little, you know, it is quite different doing natural metal finishes, and hopefully you sort of see how with these 2-3 episodes, if you've seen that with natural metal finishes, you know, it really makes a huge difference what you put underneath your main color. As I say, we only went off and put one color on top of this, and we managed to get all sorts of different sort of effects. As you could see, you know, this tail bit here was done matte where the rest of it was gloss, and the difference from that, we used black and we used high gloss finish just here, and we get all sorts of differences, as well as the tinting, and the cockpit, a little bit hard to see in there, but you know, it does look cool with the Mark 1 eyeball. So yeah, I've enjoyed this. The kit itself went together really well. Fantastic detail. Hopefully you can sort of see with all that nice sublime gorgeous surface detail that is on there. I will say though, the decals were pants, right? I don't know what was going on with this kit. I've done loads of Eduard kits before. The decals have been not the best, but they've been good, and they've worked well with micro solid set, but the ones in this were just absolutely pants. They just would not, even when I was coming out with Mr. Mark softer and setter, it really was hard to get them to conform and get into those recessed panel lines and recessed rivets. Not the best. I don't know if I had an off sheet or something, but they were pretty bad. But apart from that, I mean, these kits are actually, you know, pretty good value for the money. Fantastic kits, you know, cannot grumble with it. So hopefully you've enjoyed this nice advanced step-by-step of the P-51D Mustang. I'm going to start looking at what's going to be the next step-by-step, and hopefully I'll see you for that next step-by-step. Go check out the Genesis Models website for all those videos and lot content and everything. But until next time, as always, my name is Bobby Waldron, this is Genesis Models, and I hope you've enjoyed.